John, how are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you, Steve.
Hey, you had a lot of Euros, or if you went after a few Euros when you got here, you've had, obviously Markkinen, and you had some of the other guys. Did this come about, the guys you have now? How did that work out? Did one get the other, and was it in your plan to get this many? How did it all happen?
Well, I would say about 2 years ago, Steve, you try to always take inventory of, what you do that works and things maybe that we can do better. And then obviously taking into account the landscape of the industry that we're all in. And, college basketball obviously is the one we're talking about. And I just think there's so many great examples of either singular international players that have come over here and made a big impact. Sometimes it's on one team. Sometimes it's for their entire career. Then you have programs that have just done it well, not just in a single season, but for a long period of time. Obviously, Gonzaga really comes to mind. Me being here for over a decade and competing against Gonzaga, I think it's one of the ingredients that makes them such a successful program, that they don't rely on just one aspect of recruiting. They've gotten some great 4-year transfers, players that have actually sat out and then impacted, their program. Kyle Wiltshire is an example of that. Clearly, the international players, some which, hit the ground running, but others that have developed within their program and, almost become like the fabric of Gonzaga, right? And then obviously you have high school recruiting in our country, and then most recently you have the eligible immediately transfers. So I think for us, especially when Jack Murphy came aboard, because Jack has the passion to recruit international, he has the contacts, and I think the know-how. It just made sense. And sometimes it takes about a year or so for you to see the results. But we set out as far back as a couple of years to mix it in and make it a part of what we do. I think each year is different, obviously, because we signed only one player in the fall class, Dalen Terry, this past year. And then you never really know how many you're going to lose when you bring in 4 freshmen, 3 of them that leave. All of a sudden now you have a lot of need. And, thank goodness we had cultivated that. And I think that the players, the young guys will be coming in, will be great additions to our program. And we welcome them with open arms. And I think that at the end of the day, the class that we put together is a very good one. It's just like you said, this year it's maybe a little bit more heavy towards international. That also doesn't mean next year we're going to bring in, 4 or 5 international players. Maybe one, maybe none. I don't know. But I think being able to pull from different aspects of recruiting takes a lot of pressure off of, especially a program like ours that oftentimes we need to call on 4, 5, 6 new players from one season to the next.
All right, David Kelly, go ahead.
Hey, Sean, can you hear me good?
I can hear you.
Hey, Sean, just in February of 2018, after that infamous ESPN article came out, Jason Terry put out a tweet that's well published that said, it's time for us to clean house here and bring back our own bloodlines for Lute's legacy. How did you guys move past that over the course of the 2 years that it took now for you to get into a position where he could be a coach for you?
Well, there's a lot of people who reacted to that day. There's a long line. And you know what? Based on the information that they had, if you had a passion towards the program that we're all a part of now, Arizona basketball, that was a moment you remembered and you were trying to figure it out. To Jason's credit, and I guess mine as well, having nothing to do with him eventually becoming an assistant coach here. We repaired that, talked about it, and had a good conversation about it some time ago. And I appreciated at that moment just the thought that he had of reaching out and getting back on the same page. And he didn't need to explain the emotion behind what he said. I think I understood it. And it's one of the things that you appreciate about our program, David, is that there's people that our program matters to them. They want us to do well. They care a great deal about it. And when you care about something, sometimes you can become emotional. But we crossed that bridge a long, long time ago. That had obviously nothing to do with me coming his direction and eventually making him a part of our staff. So I've gotten to know him a lot better. Like you do with all these guys, they're busy. They're NBA players. They have their own careers. You watch them from afar and respect them a great deal, but you don't have a whole lot of interaction. But as Jason's career is winding down, I've gotten a chance to really know him, and I'm thrilled to add him as an assistant coach and really a big, big part of our future.
Brian Peterson, go ahead next.
Coach, do you have any sort of update about the status eligibility-wise of James Akinjo? And if so, do you expect any effect by the pandemic to impact that?
I can't speak on the pandemic part of it. We're in conversations, with the NCAA, as I think a lot of college basketball programs are. And it's a work in progress. We have no expectations. I think the summer will kind of put James in a place that he deserves to be in. And, we're looking forward to him being a big part of our team, obviously. When that starting point will begin, we don't have control over it. And that decision has not been made. I don't think that we'll completely know maybe until even the fall, the beginning of the new school year in the fall semester.
Bruce, you're up next. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, Sean. Regarding Jason again, also, I think there was a hiring freeze right now. Dave Hickey had indicated there'd be exceptions made probably when the restrictions were lifted, and they're not. But I figured this was maybe a sign you needed him pretty soon. So I was wondering how did that process work, getting him approved to be hired, and kind of when do you expect to start using him? When we get here, can he do recruiting already remotely, or what's the plan?
Yeah, so Justin Gainey, he resigned from Arizona. I don't have the specific date, but in early April, and Marquette hired him. Marquette was in a similar position. It's a position of need because you lost a very important part of your infrastructure, an assistant coach. They lost their assistant coach to a head coaching job. Justin Gainey obviously left us to go to Marquette. But I think in working together with our university, you can do the math. We went not quite 2 months with not having an assistant coach on our staff. You're allowed to have 3 full-time assistant coaches in addition to the head coach. We operated with 2 for, close to 2 months. But we weren't adding a position. We were simply replacing a position that you need to be successful. And, working directly with our university, we were able to, I think, give them almost 8 weeks plus without any salary at that position and 1 person down. And then at this point, I think it's just crucial for, our success, but also in fairness to Jason, you have to let a new person, a new coach come in and have a chance to move into the community, get to know your returning players, whether they're here or not, and, at least get 1 foot on the ground over the summer so that when the school year begins, there's familiarity with each other. And, but we're grateful we were able to hire him. But again, keeping in mind that we went almost 2 months without having anybody in his position. I think you're muted, Bruce. There you go.
Hi, Coach Miller. Hope everything's going well. I wanted to check in with you to see what's the morale as a whole of the staff and the players that you've talked to when it comes to COVID-19, and how optimistic is everybody that we will actually end up having a season that matters, where there might be some fans in the crowd and other things?
Well, I think our staff and our players, and really their players' families as well, I think the first thing to speak on is just how this past year ended. It's just we were a team that was really looking forward to March Madness. Ironically, we might have played one of the last games that was played before everything was shut down in the Pac-12 tournament, and we played well against Washington. Obviously, when you sign up for college basketball, your hopes is that on Selection Sunday, you're a part of the NCAA tournament, and then you're playing your best where you can make that part of the season magical. We don't know how that would have gone, but I do think we had the makings of a special ending to a season in which, we were in a lot of different battles. But like I mentioned maybe in a statement a month or so ago, I think we hold our head high on a lot of things that we were able to accomplish with a young group and a talented group that, again, I think had reached a point where we could have potentially been a very dangerous team moving forward. But so when it ends like that, there's really no, I guess, script to follow. You don't have anything to compare it to. You're getting ready to play USC, and all of a sudden you don't see these guys. I still haven't seen them. I guess we're in the 80s, almost 90 days now. So, who left, who's coming back, who's not here yet, we're all kind of like in the stratosphere. But what we've tried to do is really stay engaged in as regular contact as we could with the guys that are returning, and really even some of the guys that have left, making sure that academically they're in good place, and that they're healthy and they're safe, and that if they have any questions regarding the virus or concerns, that we've put them in a position to get answers from us. So we're in regular contact. In terms of the future, I think we're all very, very optimistic. I mean, we have an amazing leader of our university. And, when you think about Dr. Robbins' background, it's so unique. Former heart surgeon. He has the know-how and I think a lot of contacts that aren't at the fingertips of a lot of college presidents. So to see him talk the way he has about, coming back this fall in person and knowing that he's leading us, I think he gives a lot of us peace of mind and a lot of confidence. But we're preparing not only for a season as a staff and as a returning team, but we're preparing to have at least us all together at some point this summer. And we want to hit the ground running. All of us need hope. We're a much better place all around than we would have been 2 months ago. And, the one thing about college basketball, we're still 5 months away, maybe in 5.5 when you consider games. So there's a lot that's still going to happen. It's just our responsibility to prepare. And I think most importantly for us is to make sure that our guys are healthy, that are educated on the virus as much as they can be, and that we're in regular dialogue with them in that mode. And also academically, our guys really did an amazing job in the spring semester in terms of school. And I think it's something we can build on.
CJ, go ahead.
Coach, good to hear from you. Hope you and your family are well.
Same.
What do the Tubelis twins bring to the program, and what went into their recruitment?
Well, they're the last two to be a part of our class. I think that when you leave home and it's go to college, I think that's a big step. But when you leave Europe to come here to the University of Arizona, I think it's awesome that they'll have each other. They're a very close family. They can rely on each other both on and off the court and in the classroom. And I think it's going to help their success, quite a bit. We're excited about both guys. Obviously, Azuolas is probably a little bit more advanced and more decorated at the moment. And, just talking about him, I think he gives us a lot of the same things that we came to love about Zeke Naji, in that he's a forward that's versatile, very physical, can impact the game around the basket, but also is adept away from the rim, maybe even a little bit more so than Zeke. Zeke may be a little bit bigger and more physical around the basket, but the one thing about all of our guys that are coming in from the international game, they've been battle tested in FIBA. They've played for their country. They've played against some great competition in Europe. They've traveled to the United States, almost all of them. And I think you have a good feel, and they have a good feel for the game. So, they're not going to be a deer in headlights when it comes to college basketball. There's certainly going to be an adjustment period, but I think all of them come very well coached, very well schooled, and having played in a variety of competitive environments that will remind them of college. I think the more important part of it is, the cultural adjustment, being a long way from home with the virus, and making sure that we welcome them with open arms, as a university, as a community, and as a basketball program. But, specifically as it applies to those two guys, the Bellis brothers, Lithuania is a country that speaks for itself when it comes to having great success. And it really, really does. There's been an amazing amount of players from their country that have come over here and impacted college and the NBA. Their national teams are always incredibly well coached and competitive, and those guys are a part of that.
Jason Shear, go ahead.
Hey, Coach, there's a number of guys on the roster this upcoming season that can really handle the ball. What are the benefits in your offense of basically having 2-point guards on the court at the same time?
No, you're right. That's a very good observation. And it's something that we don't have total control over right now as college basketball coaches, especially when you go through so much change from one year to the next. Once in a while, your front court players may be more physical, big, around the basket types of players. Sometimes from one season to the next, you could have a more skilled face-up big, which changes things. Same goes for guards. But not only do I think that at times we'll have two ball handlers on the court, but really, for the first time, maybe since we've had, Nick Johnson and Gabe York with TJ McConnell, kind of that group where you think about how those three play, they all could really handle it. We're going to have three guards on the court. That's where our depth is. And even the subs, so when you go through whoever starts, whoever doesn't, when we sub perimeter, I think that won't change. There's guys that can pass, dribble, and shoot, and they're more guards than they are big wings and forwards. So I think that'll allow us to, to get more dribble penetration and not rely maybe on one pure ball handler, like Nico was in this year, that role. And those guys kind of play off of each other and help each other more. So that's something we're aware of. The one thing about the situation we're in terms of quarantine, you have more time than ever to really think about basketball and think about the team you're going to coach, learn from some things that maybe you could do better. And we've really tried to spend a lot of time over the last 6 to 8 weeks in forging ahead and preparing for what you just asked.
Justin Spears, you're up next.
Hey, Coach, good to see you again. Just curious, what is the status of Brandon Williams for this upcoming year?
Yeah, so Brandon, in the full context, he had surgery last spring, which everybody's aware of. Brandon did not sustain an injury. This was a pre-existing condition that with the doctors and his family's really knowledge and advice and multiple conversations in which we were included, I think all of us looked at that surgery as being an important part of his future. Like I mentioned at that time, it's a unique type of surgery. It's certainly a type of surgery that takes you out of all activity for more than a year. So if you do the timeline, right when the, COVID-19 situation affected the world, it might have affected Brandon as much as anybody because the last 25% of rehab, recuperation, and especially coming back from a surgery of that magnitude, that may be the most crucial part. It's the time where you're put on the court with others. It's a time where you get cleared to do more than just straight line running, jumping, going side to side, and shooting. And then you start to monitor his symptoms. Does he experience swelling when you do this? No. And then the other part is, atrophy. When you go through surgery like you go through, it's not your knee. You're more susceptible to other injuries, like you lose your hamstring, you lose your quad. He hasn't played 5-on-5 basketball in quite some time. So without his ability to finish everything that we set out to finish, what he did is what all of our players did, and he went home, finished school, and did the best that he could. So he's still in conversations with the doctors, but as of even 5 to 7 days ago, he hasn't really even been able to get evaluated by any doctor based on, nothing injury related, but all the COVID, okay? So I think his status hasn't changed. He's on full scholarship. He's finishing up the spring semester. As a matter of fact, he's in a summer class right now. And our hope is we need to be able to get him back whenever we get clearance so that he can finish a very crucial part. Not until we cross that, will he completely feel comfortable on when and if and how that's going to work on getting back onto the court. So that's why it's somewhat ambiguous. It's nothing that we're trying to, hide or put in a certain deal. Some of the things that have been reported about, where the standing of his knee aren't necessarily true. And the biggest reason is it's the unknown. Let's hope that the last part of his recuperation and rehab and, the healing goes well, but it's still a 25% part of it that's missing. When we get through that, I think we'll all be able to kind of give you on where he's at. I think we're hoping that this will lead him back onto the court.
So he's still with the team, because I know he was on that podcast saying, I'm going to play. It's just a matter of where. And then you look at the scholarship situation.
Yep, I understand all that. I think just from his perspective, he hasn't played in over a year, right? I talked about this briefly last fall, but with all that we've gone through as a program the last couple of years, one of the highlights for me is that we were able to hang on and recruit Brandon to Arizona, not one time, but twice. I mean, Brandon is a heck of a basketball player. You guys saw him really at about, 75, 80% of wherever he was as a freshman. He was, really our leading scorer, and for the most part, if not our best overall player in that season, one of them. I mean, he could have been on the all-freshman team if he would have been able to finish. So, you plug him into our team a year ago, that's something that we wish we had, okay? But you're talking to him at 19, and you imagine how he's chomping at the bit just to get back out there. And, I think when he reads of he's not going to play or he's not going to be as good or this and that about his surgery, like all of us, he wishes he had the answers. He doesn't completely have them all. So I don't at all look at him as speaking out, especially even out of some frustration. I mean, heck, I'm frustrated in and of his coach. I'm frustrated for him. You can imagine how he feels. So I think the number one thing we can control is whenever we're allowed to get him back here, we're going to do that. He'll have our doctors. We'll have new MRIs. He'll be able to hopefully pick up where he left off and give it his best to finish what he started. But for us or anybody to speculate on his future when he was never able to finish the crucial part of his recovery, that's just not fair right now. And I think we have to let this play out. If we didn't hit the virus, I think all the answers would be clearly on the table. Number one, I think he would know himself how healthy he is and what he can and can't do.
Bruce, you're up next.
Yeah, Sean, I wanted to ask you about when specifically, or I know it's maybe impossible to say specifically, but when you hope to have the guys back for some workouts, what are the key protocols you'll have to go? Because one thing that struck me, the Pac-12 said that athletes have to have masks at all times. And I thought, is that practical for a basketball player to be going up and down with a mask on? How does that work? And maybe what are some of the other things? But just, if you don't mind, also just to crystal clear, following up on what Justin said, you have 14 guys on scholarship. So it looked to me like maybe if Brandon came back at all, it would be only on a medical scholarship. And is that kind of where it's going? I mean, or if he comes back as a player, would you have to make room for him somehow?
Yeah, not necessarily true. The only thing I would tell you, Bruce, is it's late May. I thought about it, many, many times this spring. If you go back a year ago, we had, I think, 3, maybe 4 things that happened in terms of our roster changing from the Memorial weekend until we began the fall semester. There's different guys that have some academic work to do. In our case, clearly we're working hard from the international perspective to make sure that we have any problems solved and working there. We have a lot of guys that are home and, working academically and, to establish themselves coming back. But I think when we get through the summer and we show up in the fall, we'll be at 13 scholarship players, and I think that it will all work out. And I say that with great confidence. Work out not only for our program, but I think work out for everybody that we're involved with at the moment. In terms of the mask, Bruce,
Yeah.
as you know, things change so much. What maybe something was said 2 months ago or even 2 weeks ago, with new information, I think there's more flexibility, more answers. So, I'm just, I think, waiting patiently. We're trying to do the best we can of communicating appropriate messages to our players and their families so that when, in fact, they come back, and I would say at the earliest they would be able to come back would be sometime in July. Although I don't have a definite on that, nor do I have a date. But if that would be the case, how that would work, we're going to follow protocol so that their safety is put number one. And if that means that we have to wear a mask, then we'll wear a mask. So we're not there yet, but one thing about basketball that's unique is most of our work in the summer is in small groups. And a lot of our work is skill and non-contact. So I think if you take those two things into consideration, and then just the overall size of our roster, it's very easy to break our roster into small groups. You add the strength and conditioning element, same thing there. Social distancing, being able to work individually in a weight room. Our weight room is equipped to handle that. And, I think between our doctors, trainer, Coach Rounds, and our staff, we'll be well ready. I think well versed, and I think ready when they do show up. But we're not there yet. And it's like some of the questions I wish I could just have a complete answer for you. We have a lot of moving parts, as you guys know.
Sean, obviously this has been a very emotional week in our community and in this nation with the reaction to the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. How have you addressed that with your players? Have you had one-on-one conversations with kids? Have you guys had any type of group chat to discuss feelings on that? And in terms of protesting, what protocols have you told your kids about what you want to see from them if they decide that that's something that they want to do in the individual communities where they are currently located?
Yeah, first of all, David, it is a very tough time for all of us. It's a tough time for every one of our players and their families. I think the answer to your question, and I'm confident in saying this, is, this latest event, is kind of like a moment of reckoning for all of us to some degree. But, we talk to our players all the time about these issues. As you know, this one incident didn't spur emotions inside of them. They've had these emotions as far back as when they were in grade school, through examples in their own life, things that have happened in their neighborhood or with their own family members, or things that they have witnessed on television or they've read about their whole life. So I think the first part is, whether it be individually, whether it be, group setting, talking about these types of issues throughout the school year and the summer, and really incorporating our university to help us with these types of things. That's ongoing. That's all the time. That's even before this unfortunate, situation occurred. Now that it has occurred, I think that we have a meeting scheduled. Again, there's so many moving parts that there's some group of our team that we're allowed to be on a Zoom call together. There's others that aren't allowed to be on that call. So if you think about that, we don't really have the makings of next year's team all to be in one situation, one location, and talk about one subject matter at once. So we've reached out individually. Sometimes it's a conversation on the phone. As this week approaches, we have several Zoom calls, and that will be a very, very strong topic at the beginning of each conversation. But I feel really confident and certain and really good about that this isn't a situation that occurred that makes us talk about these types of things. I think it's something that affects our players every day that they've been on our campus. And we try to the best of our ability to be in it, to listen, to talk, and really to try to put them in a position to solve some of these problems. In the statement that I came out with yesterday, one of the things that I tried to really talk about is how sports can teach you a lot. And I think that the one responsibility that we have here at Arizona is when our student athletes are a part of our programs, that they learn these lessons so that when their time ends and they leave us, that they can call on the lessons that they learned many times through sports and apply those to social settings and decision making, where they can really help not only their own families, but their communities and their companies and the people in the other part of the organizations that they're going to be a part of when they leave us. So obviously it's at the top of the list right now. I don't even know if there is a list when something like this happens, and watching in our country how it's affected everybody in such an emotional way. I think it's what we are thinking a lot about with our team and working together to help them as best we can.
Jason Shear, go ahead.
Coach, what did you see from Jordan Brown throughout practice this season, and what are your expectations for him coming up?
Yeah, I mean, so many times, Jason, there's so much spotlight put on the incoming recruits, the guys that weren't here a year ago, that you almost forget about those guys that have already been here. Stone Gettings ended up being a starter for us this year. I kind of put Stone in that boat, last off season, where not a lot of people asked me questions about him. But I think Stone was a part of why we became an NCAA tournament team. We needed his leadership, his age, his skill level, and really, his depth. I wish we had Stone in the month of December this past year in non-conference. I think it cost us at least one big win. So Jordan Brown, we have a good feel for him. He has a good feel for our system. He played at Nevada. We were familiar with Jordan in the recruiting aspect of things, in that he was a decorated high school player, had a lot of great choices when he left high school. But the one word that I'll give you about him that I think you will show up right away is he has a physical presence as a basketball player. He loves contact. He doesn't shy away from contact. It shows up rebounding at both ends. It shows up in him being able to play, I think, our style of defense. He's also quick enough and agile enough that he moves his feet really well away from the basket. But in our practices against some really good competition, day in, day out, we believe in him as a guy that we can throw the ball to, and he can score around the basket as well. So Jordan's going to be a big, big part of our success. I know, like a lot of guys, he's frustrated because, when our season ended, if you're somebody who sat out, for the first time in a long time, you feel like everybody else, and you're eager to get things started with your off-season program. I know he's doing the best he can at home in Sacramento, but he worked really hard with Coach Rounds and our strength and conditioning program, practiced every day, worked individually. And, I love him as a competitor. I love his physicality. And, we're not welcoming yet another young freshman to our team. He's 2 years older, and I think you'll feel that when you watch him play for us. And I'm really glad we have him. The other thing about Jordan is he's not a small guy. Jordan's every bit 6'9". I think he's 220 plus right now. And our hope was that we would have had him at around 225 pounds. So if you think about Zeke, very similar physically. And I think his teammates respect him. We respect him. And, he's somebody that's going to be a difference maker for us as we approach this year.
Javier, you're up next.
Hey, Sean. I just wanted to ask you about the dynamics of coaching with Jason. What kind of role will he have, and just his impact on recruiting? We're already seeing it in the Pacific Northwest. Just what your overall thoughts about those two subjects?
Yeah, a couple of years ago, we had Damon Stoudemire on our staff. And a lot like JT, Damon came with the wealth of NBA experience. And, you start talking about 6th man of the year, rookie of the year, all-star, guys that have played, a decade in the NBA. In Jason's case, almost 2 decades. They have a presence with the players that you coach already. They have a presence on game day that gives everybody confidence that they're a part of what we do. They give our crowd and our fans an excitement because people fell in love with them many years ago when they watched them play as an Arizona Wildcat. And then, above and beyond that, I think there's 2 other factors. When Damon brought these types of things to the table as well, is they have a presence recruiting. In our day and age, when so many dreams and goals are to leave school whenever that time is and make their dreams come true as an NBA player, a draft pick, to do it maybe early, not after 4 years, but maybe before that time. Jason Terry's been there and done it, and he's been there and done it in a big, big way. There are a lot of answers that he has to questions. And I think the other part of it is when you go on and have a storied NBA career like Damon and Jason have, and then you want to come back to Tucson, isn't what this is all about? The place that allowed you to reach your dreams and goals, the place that you loved, that you got a college degree from, that you wanted to come back and give back and be a part of the program again. And I think that speaks volumes about the type of program, the type of community, and how Tucson and our fans made those types of players feel that they want to come back and kind of make this their first step in coaching. So, I think the last part is, him working directly with our players. In Jason's case, anyone you talk to about him as a player, they talk about his intelligence, his process. He's 7th all time in NBA history in 3-pointers made. He's not 6'7". He did it through hard work. He did it through having routines. He did it through just taking care of his body in a way that very few people can do. And, those are all things that he can give knowledge-wise to our players. Working, with guards, working defensively, guys that watched him play, you got to remember how great of a defensive player he was and the steals that he got here at Arizona and as an NBA player. And, I believe that he's going to impact really all aspects. And, the final part is that, he's going to continue, what I hope is learn the game, learn our system, add to his knowledge and prepare himself to go on and have a great coaching career. We're really proud of Damon Stoudemire. Watching all the success he's had at Pacific, it's you feel really good for him. And then, Joseph Blair. And JB wasn't an accountable coach, but he was an undergraduate manager for us. He impacted us in a different way while he was here, but to watch him go on and be an assistant coach with the Philadelphia 76ers, I think back to many practices and days where our big guys just respected JB. Big guys respect those that have walked in the shoes that they're in. And I think the same will hold true when you think about Jason Terry. He's played at Arizona. He's won a high school state championship. He's won a national championship. He's won an NBA world championship. He's been in the NBA 6th man of the year. He's been the national player of the year in college basketball. And he's also been the 6th man on a team that won a national championship. So, all of those things he brings to the table by really just walking in the door. But what I love about him is, you feel him coming. He brings a smile to your face. He has an energy about him and an enthusiasm and a love for the game. He's a father, a husband. He has 5 daughters. They love basketball. And, I think that he's, in many ways, the perfect assistant coach to come in at this time.
Bruce, go ahead.
Yeah, Sean, you mentioned something before about some of the Zoom meetings you're having. Some people can get on and some can't. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that, like, because is that players that haven't enrolled yet, they can't be on? Or and what are you guys doing? Like, for example, I was just wondering if you could kind of take us through a little bit about how this spring, since they lifted their restrictions a little bit, I mean, can you actually evaluate guys working on their skills with video, or what kind of things have been going on the last month or so?
No, our focus is number one, Bruce, their health and well-being, and their family's health and well-being, because all it takes in today's world is somebody in their own house or family that God forbid gets the virus, and that's a game changer to some extent for them. So that's number one. Number two is academically. I mean, everything in their world became online. They're not here with tutoring. So we reestablished all of their learning online, making sure that they had all the tools and the ability to finish the semester strong. And that was our focus and our only focus for a long, long time. I think now it's to just give them a lot of hope, make sure that we're monitoring their progress. We don't watch them do anything as much as, they make us aware through what they have. Some of our guys have access to a gym and a weight room, some don't. And if they don't, there's not a lot we can do other than encourage them to make the best of their situation. But we try to take a weekly approach. We don't always have like a mandatory Zoom meeting each week, because I think sometimes the one thing about us is we did have a season. We didn't finish it, but this is typically the time where they're around family and friends and disengaged from our staff. So we've given them their space. But as we're in June now and we approach July and a possible return, I think with the players that we have already in our program that will be returning, we're in conversations with them face to face, somehow, whether it be small group or as a total group of that each week. The players who haven't finished up their high school year, and quite a few of them haven't, we deal with them as their own group. They're not allowed to engage with those that are already in our program. So I think those are the 2 types of groups that we're talking about. But I would say on a weekly basis, we're trying to touch our players multiple times, whether it's through a phone call, academics, strength and conditioning, Zoom call. Really, every 7 days they're hearing from us, and we're checking in with them throughout the week.
Oh,
Go ahead, Bruce.
well, just you did say the Zoom call thing at the beginning. That was like when you have team meetings, or some of them not available to get on it because they're not enrolled yet. Is that what you said?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And do you expect at least say the international guys to enroll at least online maybe this month or something, or what's the plan?
Yeah. So we can talk to them exclusively, right? We could talk to them as a group. We could talk to them one-on-one at this point. We're just not able to include them with our returning players until they're taking a class at Arizona and they've graduated from high school. So, early June, most schools haven't completely finished. I know in Arizona, we finish early, but throughout the world and our country, there's quite a few of these guys that are just finishing up their last assignments to be graduates from high school. So whenever that time comes and they complete that, and then they enroll here in the summer, then we can include them on next year's team.
Am I muted now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, I wondered if you had any doubts about, especially the guys in Europe, any doubts about can they get here? When can they get here? Who knows what's going to happen with these travel restrictions? I mean, is that something you're even dealing with, or you just figure who knows right now?
I mean, we just turned the calendar to early June. If you think back to early April or late March when everything started, we've made a lot of progress, and I think all of us, for example, everybody's preparing for a fall semester in-person classes, but that date doesn't come until August 24th. I mean, you're preparing for that date, but we still have, almost 3 months until that time comes. And I think the world will be a different place then than it is now. That doesn't mean that we're not working in some way, shape, or form on a daily basis with them and their families, gathering information, but we're confident that, they'll be able to, like they always have, be able to attend a university of their choice, be a part of our country, and be able to leave their country to do so. So we're not there yet. We're working through, each of them has their own situation, but we've made a lot of progress over the last month, and we anticipate making a lot of progress here over the next 2.5 months to get them all here for sure.
If Nate, or can I still ask another
Yeah,
one?
go ahead.
I still got a couple more, sorry. Just wondering, right now, a couple of schools, Kansas, Louisville, have come, NCAA's kind of moved along, things have come out. There's still a few schools, including Arizona, that haven't gotten a letter yet. And I'm wondering, I know you've been limited in what you can say about it, but I was wondering, at least as far as recruiting and moving on in life, has that been any issue that things are kind of still in limbo?
Bruce, I'm going to give you the same answer that I gave you day one. And, if I add any layer to it, it'd only be that, it's a university policy for none of us to comment on any investigation. And being that I'm here at the university, I'm not able to comment on it. As you followed us, we've been hard at work recruiting. I can make the case that this November, the class of 2021 is going to be a really important class. I think if we get that right on the heels of who we've been able to make a part of our program in the class of 2020, that I think we can return to a very, very high level as a basketball program. So, that's where we're at. I think having Jason here finally, it gives us a full staff for the first time in a while. He gives us a special ingredient and an exciting one, and we're hard at that, working at that. We're eager to get our team back here in July, and time continues to move for sure.
You mentioned, you broke down Jordan's game a little bit and what he's been doing, but I guess, and one of the things that struck me is last year you made a lot of comments about how every front court player had a different skill set, and that certainly saw the case. But I didn't know the difference between, say, Jordan, Daniel Bacho, and Azuolas. How would you kind of break down what each of those guys bring and how you might use them next year, at least from what you can tell now?
Yeah, I mean, speaking as it stands at this moment, and looking at how we've put our front court together, you always crave depth along the front line. Foul trouble, injuries, long season, different players that play better against certain opponents. I'll start with the guys that we have coming back. Ira Lee, who's a senior, he's in his 4th year. Ira's been through a lot of experiences, and the physicality that he brings. Oftentimes seniors have their very best season in their last year with us, and I'm hoping that Ira's one of those guys. We all saw glimpses of Christian Coloco, and Christian's very different than everybody else on our team in that he has the gift of shot blocking. But, getting him bigger and stronger, and I think being able to get him that game experience that we got him in the months of January and February, I think he's going to be further along than he may have otherwise been if he didn't play as much last year. But, we really believe in him, and I think that it'll be a night and day difference between who you saw as a freshman and having more of those moments, the good moments, as a sophomore. He's going to be a better player, and he's 7 feet tall, like we talked about, different than anybody else. So Jordan Brown, I've talked a lot about him. So I think those are the 3 that we watched, with us every day last year. And then being able to add, Azuolas and Daniel. I mean, Daniel is big, I think 6'10" plus, has great experience playing in the FIBA game, playing at a very high level in Europe, playing over here as well. I think that he's incredibly mobile. He can go both inside and out. And, as you guys know, watching over the years, there's a difference playing on the court at 6'10" than 6'7" or 6'8". And he's every bit 6'10" and loves the game and is physical. I think he's going to bring a lot of great characteristics to our team as a freshman. And Azuolas, again, if you watch his highlights, the one thing, I talked about it, he too is physical, but I would say, him being able to push the ball, dribble, being able to play both outside and inside and do it at 6'9" plus, I think he might be as battle tested as any of these guys that are a part of our class. So, I gave you a lot of names, and we're really banking on that experience and depth. It helps every day in practice. And with so many of these guys being young, I think they'll develop, they'll improve as the year goes on. So it's always great to be able to play. It allows you to play physical, be a better rebounding team, and be a better overall team, I think, from November to March. So we're excited about the depth and the size, and I think the combination of, returning players with the talent of the newcomers.
You talked about a lot of the guards too. I just wanted Jamal Baker, anything up, with his knee in the off season that, how has that gone? Is he pretty much, he had to play kind of in a rough situation at times. How is he doing now?
Yeah. Jamal got great experience last year. He played a lot of minutes. There are several games we can all point to that he's the reason we won at Washington. You think about that game, the key 3-point shots that he made. And, he also is adept at playing two positions. He played the 1 and the 2. Again, I think just being more confident, adding to the experience he gained. At Kentucky, he didn't get a lot of game experience, but last year he was able to gain that. And, there's nothing like being able to get in the game and play. His health, I think he's had a chance to really recuperate. Again, he's not with us every day right now. We wish he was, but I know he's working really hard and has access to a number of things there right by his house. So we're counting on Jamal. And again, experience is everything. When so much of the spotlight is focused on those newcomers, one of the things that really helps them is when you have some returning players that are good and experienced, it just seems to go better. And Jamal's one of those guys we're counting on.
If I could ask you one final, just kind of big picture question. I know you guys have the advantage of time with basketball as far as this whole COVID situation, but the one thing that struck me is in basketball, you're inside, you particularly have 14,000 fans screaming and yelling. Maybe could that be trickier to deal with down the line, assuming nothing happens vaccine-wise or whatever before the season starts? And do you have any kind of concerns about, what's it going to look like next season? How are we going to do this? That kind of thing?
I don't, Bruce. We give it a lot of thought. Some of it is what you said. We don't really know how it'll start. We don't know what the middle of our season will look like, and we don't know what the ending will look like. I do think every couple months things seem to move in a positive direction, but there's so much unknown. The one thing that I do know is we're all going to be given the same conditions, whatever those conditions are. So, it's up to us to adapt, be ready, and be the best that we can be on whatever's in front of us. We having games taken from us, no tournament, no Pac-12 tournament. I think first of all, we're just eagerly and anticipating a season. And, again, we have 4 or 5 months to go before we get to that point. You have college football, the NFL, and a lot of other things that will happen before we ever get started. We have great leadership. And, the Pac-12, when we spoke at our conference meetings this spring, which we did over Zoom, we got a lot of great optimism and hope. We have some smart people in our conference, from the doctors to the presidents to the commissioner of our conference that are working with the best people in the world. So I think they'll lead us in the right direction. And, I think we're at the beginning of a long summer. It'll be interesting when we come back together again, late in August or early in the fall, where we all are. But we're preparing for next season, and we're excited about the team that we're putting together. And I think the prospects of what we have in front of us.
Great, thanks.
All right, anybody else? Last call for questions here. All right, looks like we're done. Coach, thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Guys,
you.
stay safe.
Yeah, be safe, and appreciate your time.
Thank you.